Hi, I'm Janet Freeman-Daily, a lung cancer patient activist. Welcome to Hope with Answers. I'm here with Dr. Ross Camidge.
Can you call me Ross, please?
Yes, thank you very much. And we're going to be talking about clinical trials. Ross, if someone is interested in a clinical trial, how do they bring that up with their doctor? Do they say, is that a treatment option for me?
Well, I can imagine two scenarios. So one is you feel, or your family or friends have said, don't forget to ask about clinical trials, and then you've just got to inject that into the conversation. So the doctor's telling you about what they plan to do, and then you have to sort of say, hold on a second, is there something within a clinical trial that might be a better fit for me? And we can unpack that later. The other situation is where you're going in and you're expecting them to talk about treatment, and then they go, oh, and by the way, I want to talk to you about this clinical trial. And then your brain goes, yeah, And so that's where, you have to go, whoa. And again, you have to get a toolkit for learning how to deal with that and, say, is this clinical trial a terrible idea, or is this the best thing for me?
Okay. So some of the concerns on that is, does this hospital or this doctor's office have clinical trials, or do I have to go somewhere else?
So the current situation is, unfortunately, that the clinical trial doesn't come to you. You have to go to where the clinical trial is. So if your doctor's office has a clinical trial, that's good. You can explore what that clinical trial is. It may not be the best one. There may be other trials somewhere else. Let's say that trial is somewhere else. First of all, you've got to check that your insurance is going to cover you to go there. But if it does, then they tend to adopt most, if not all, of your care whilst you're on that trial.
Okay. So you talked about my insurance. If I want to go into a clinical trial because I think it's going to pay for all my care, does that work, or what does the clinical trial actually cover?
Well, so no, strangely enough, that's not, because that would be considered an incentive to go into the clinical trial. You'd be bribing someone to be a guinea pig.
Okay. Yeah.
So what happens is stuff which you normally have a copay for, you have a copay for.
Yeah, lots of copays.
But stuff which is kind of like extra, a brand new drug that isn't licensed, you can't charge you for something that's not licensed, or new tests or extra scans or whatever. Anything that's on top of the standard of care is absorbed by the sponsor of the study.
Okay, so standard of care. I understand that if you go into a clinical trial, they're usually at a teaching hospital or an academic hospital. I would expect that they would be very up on the best ways to do cancer care. In some ways, going to a clinical trial ensures you're going to get the best possible cancer care.
Well, you're horribly biased because you're looked after by me, but yes.
It's true.
So the reality is that the places which do clinical trials sometimes are also at the cutting edge for lots of other things. Now, so that's a kind of ancillary benefit. And also when you're in a clinical trial, you just tend to get fussed over more. I wrote an article once upon a time which was about, guinea pigs, test pilots or prize poodles, and it came from the idea that I had a patient who said, I'm on this trial, I don't feel like a guinea pig. With everyone fussing over me, I feel like a prize poodle. And so that, that's the kind of knock-on benefit of being in a trial. Woof. I like your hair.
Thank you. All right, so does that mean if I go to a clinical trial, I don't see my own doctor at my own hospital anymore?
Well, there isn't one simple answer to that. So sometimes you can transition all of your care to where that clinical trial is, and they adopt you and they do everything for you. Sometimes, if we use Kaiser as an example, they have more of a kind of partnership relationship. So they will send someone to go on a clinical trial somewhere else, but they try and keep the big ticket standard of care items within the Kaiser system. So you have to have your CT scans back at Kaiser, or if something happens, like you need hydration with intravenous fluids, you have to go have it back at Kaiser. So it's a little clunky, but it also means that you get to stay in contact with your old doctor.
Well, so in my case, I live in Seattle and I go to my clinical trial in Denver. My main oncologist is 1,000 miles away. If I have an issue with not feeling well, I might call my local doctor because I want to go into my local hospital. But they can always call you.
Yeah.
And then you can tell them, how they might modify things because of the drug that I'm on.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think if you live locally and somebody says, I'm going to adopt everything, that might be the easiest option for some people. But yeah, I have patients who travel from Shanghai to come and see me, and so it's good that they have a local doctor because I don't do house calls in Shanghai.
Fussy.
Yeah.
So if I'm on a clinical trial and I'm taking an experimental drug, can I just do business as usual? If I get a cold, I can take an over-the-counter drug and I don't have to worry about it?
That's a totally leading question, and the answer is no. So you worry about drugs interacting. So the first thing is, if you're in an emergency, you do whatever you need to do, okay? But if you can pause for thought, you can check back in with your clinical trial coordinator or your physician and just say, is it okay to do this, that, or the other?
Yeah, and you gave me a nice little card with an 800 number, so I know who to call 24/7.
Yep.
So, which has come in handy more than once.
Good.
So, all right. So, are all clinical trials treatment trials?
Well, most of the clinical trials that people are concerned about are treatment trials, but no, a clinical trial can be anything. It can be a trial of, I've changed the curtain color in the clinic room. How do you feel about it? It can be, psychotherapy. It can be supportive care. It can be observational. I'm taking a blood sample. You're going to go on standard treatment. Does the blood sample help me predict how you're going to do? So again, you just have to unpack that at the time.
And there have been some that are just looking at different biomarkers. They're just taking blood samples from a whole bunch of people to find out what the biomarkers are, and there's no treatment involved.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, thank you very much for this conversation about
welcome.
clinical trials, and thank you for joining Hope with Answers.